Welcome. Today, we are unpacking a really fascinating explainer on a concept known as the sovereign frequency, reclaiming the king within. We're going to be diving deep into a highly complex framework from the UCGA and their Living Agenda protocol. Let's get right into it. The vision we're exploring today is framed as a sort of forensic investigation into a very specific question. Why does modern humanity feel so utterly disconnected from its own innate power? It starts with a pretty striking premise. We think we know our history. We think our symbols belong to us. But what if the most sacred ancient icons of human vitality were deliberately hacked? What if symbols that originally represented absolute peace and protection were intentionally reprogrammed by power structures, not to inspire sovereignty, but to trigger trauma and fear? Okay, so let's really dive into this. According to the sources, this shift was absolutely not an accident. Take the swastika, for example. For thousands of years, it was a geometric representation of well-being, prosperity, and a peaceful solar orbit. But the source argues that when it was rotated 45 degrees by the Nazis, its frequency was physically altered into a jagged, aggressive vibration. It's the same story with ancient runic symbols of victory. They were weaponized. And the pentagram? Originally a pagan symbol of the five elements, it was completely reduced to a diabolical caricature. The text actually has a name for this. They define it as symbolic hijacking or resignification. And the primary goal of this massive distortion? To sever humanity's connection to direct spiritual experience. The idea is that by kidnapping these symbols, the ruling powers aimed to thoroughly confuse people, specifically the descendants of what the text calls the Solar Lineage. They wanted to make sure people wouldn't recognize their own ancestral memory or their spiritual family crests. Now, what's really interesting is that this hijacking supposedly extends even to our tools of intuition. The UUCGA vision claims that the original complete tarot deck didn't actually have 78 cards, it had 80. They argue that two absolutely vital keys were actively suppressed from the deck: truth and intuition. And why remove them? Well, the source material suggests something pretty profound. A disconnected human, one stripped of their internal truth and intuition, is just a far more manageable human. So, this brings us to the narrative of what the text calls the Great Erasure. This is described as a systematic, historical decapitation of the Anunnaki Christ-Pharaoh lineage that took place roughly 2,000 years ago. The central thesis here is that an overarching empire was terrified of one thing above all else: a direct, unmediated connection to the divine. Let's map this timeline out, because it's a wild ride. The source traces this lineage back to the solar pharaohs of Egypt, specifically Cleopatra's bloodline, which was defeated by Rome around 30 BCE. But the knowledge survived. The text posits that Jesus, born decades later, actually retained this Egyptian mystery school knowledge. And during his lost years, he didn't just stay in the cradle of dogma. He traveled. He went to India to master the internal fire of Shiva, and up to Tibet to find the stillness of Buddha. He basically merged the solar DNA of Ra with Eastern spiritual sciences. When he returned, he wasn't a victim. He was a universal system. He was a living threat, proving that every single subject has the potential to be a sovereign. And this brilliantly illustrates the constant underlying conflict happening ever since. On one side, we have the empire. It's characterized by abstract control. It's gray, rigid, dogmatic. Today, it's represented by white coats, 5G towers, and corporate monocultures. On the flip side is the solar lineage. It's golden, fluid, natural, and built entirely on direct connection and biological resonance. The framework argues that the kings of today don't wear crowns. Instead, they wage a literal war on the body. The sources claim these modern powers use everyday tools to keep our biological hardware completely dormant. We're talking about low-frequency electrosmog, fluoridated water, and heavily processed foods. These are viewed as deliberate mechanisms designed to disrupt the pineal gland and literally disconnect our biological antenna from the Earth's natural frequency. This really highlights the profound brokenness of modern existence. The source points out that when we rely entirely on institutional intermediaries, whether medical, corporate, or technological, we allow our own life force and our ancestral memory to be extracted and turned into abstract control. The agenda argues that the ruling powers didn't just take the land, they made humanity lose its mind, literally, by disconnecting us from nature. And honestly, this is the best part of the whole vision. The text doesn't leave us in a place of defeat. It offers an incredibly powerful, redemptive bridge. Here is the secret. Not everything was taken. Much has simply faded, and what has faded can absolutely be rebuilt. Reclaiming the crown doesn't require waiting for a savior or joining some new religion. It just requires a conscious daily choice. The solution they offer is called biological restoration. The UUCGA Livingagenda provides a protocol explicitly designed to clean out the biological temple. The idea is that your hardware is currently just clogged with the dust of modern life. By decalcifying your system, you essentially repair your biological antenna and tune right back into that original sovereign frequency. I absolutely love the phrasing here. The bloodline is the hardware, the lifestyle is the software. The source suggests that this ancient Christ consciousness or solar DNA isn't a myth. It is literally your biological hardware. But for it to boot up and connect to what they playfully call the Multiverse Control Center, you have to run the right software. And that software, it's how you live every single day. So how do we run this software? Let's look at the actionable roadmap they provide for turning this deep esoteric philosophy into tangible lifestyle liberty. The protocol rests on 4 very clear steps: prioritizing specific hydration, adopting a Mayan raw vegan nutritional approach, physically grounding with the earth, and rigorously protecting your environmental and mental hygiene. Step 1 is hydration, and this draws heavily on concepts from Dr. Eric Laraker, who views water not just as H2O but as a bioquantum medium. Tap water is seen as heavily treated and basically dead, keeping your system totally dormant. Natural spring water, however, is viewed as a living information carrier. It literally brings the original Earth frequency right into your cells. So the rule here is living water and natural salt, first and foremost. Let's move to food and see how this builds. The Mayan raw vegan lifestyle treats food as the ultimate medicine. The agenda highly advises drinking fresh green smoothies, ideally by the water in the morning sun. Why? Because chlorophyll is seen as carrying the living intelligence of the sun directly to you. By consuming local, organic, mineral-rich foods, you are actively decalcifying that pineal gland and reversing the monoculture of the modern gut. Next up is grounding and solar rituals. This is all about stepping away from the Wi-Fi and physically rebooting your connection to Gaia. We're talking walking barefoot for just 10 to 15 minutes a day, standing in the morning sun to sync up your solar plexus, and meditating at sunrise and sunset. These practices are specifically meant to activate that internal Shiva Shakti energy flow, the exact energy the text claims the ancient Roman Empire tried so hard to suppress. Finally, true sovereignty requires relentlessly protecting your biological sanctuary, and that means practicing environmental and mental hygiene. The source advises getting electronic interference, like Wi-Fi routers, completely out of your sleeping area, strictly limiting social media, and practicing deep meditation. It also means reclaiming those suppressed tools we mentioned earlier, using the full 80-card tarot to restore your own internal truth and intuition, and simply practicing real human kindness every day. So what does this all mean? The core empowering message of this entire framework is that lifestyle equals liberty. The text argues that we are all descendants of a cosmic lineage spanning from the stars to the pyramids. According to the UUCGA, your daily lifestyle is your absolute greatest act of rebellion. It's the bridge from the black hole of mere survival over to the Multiverse Control Center of conscious creation. They truly believe the pharaoh didn't die in Egypt. The pharaoh is just waiting to wake up in your cells. The truth card is being put back into the deck today, placing the power to heal completely back into your hands. So, I'm going to leave you with a final provocative question posed by the UUCGA vision. What is the first thing you will do tomorrow to turn your faded heritage back into a living, breathing reality? Think about it. Thanks for joining us for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.